Breaking news tonight, Battleground New Hampshire. Democrats ramp up their attacks on each other before the first-in-the-nation primary.
We need to bring new voices to Washington, D.C.
Also tonight, President Trump strikes back. With impeachment behind him, the president attacks his critics and takes aim at winning re-election. Coronavirus deaths top SARS. How the outbreak is hurting businesses across this country. It's Hollywood's biggest night. Who will go home with Oscar? Plus, new worry for Americans struggling with medical debt.
You know, you wouldn't think you'd go to jail over a medical bill.
This is the CBS Weekend News.
Good evening, I'm Elaine Quijano. The Democratic candidates made last-minute appeals to New Hampshire voters today, 2 days ahead of Tuesday's crucial primary. A new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows a tight race. Like Iowa, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg share the top spots. But the primary is still up for grabs. Only 4 in 10 say they've definitely made up their mind. Nicole Killian is in Manchester.
With the countdown on in New Hampshire,
It's the heat of competition. Throwing elbows, making contrasts.
the Democratic presidential candidates are feeling the squeeze.
No, and again, we're not here to denigrate Pete. He's running a good campaign, but our views are different.
Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden on defense.
I didn't attack Pete. Pete's been attacking me. He has completely misunderstood or misrepresented my record.
Against a surging Pete Buttigieg, now digging into the former vice president's moderate support.
I'm not Barack Obama, and neither is he. Neither is anyone running for president right now.
With all the attention on the top tier, those vying to move up, not giving up yet.
When you constantly hear names like Buttigieg, Sanders, Biden, Warren, how do you break out?
They are very good people. They have, all of them, great policy proposals, but unlike them, I have results. And I think that matters to the people of New Hampshire.
Just a few days out from the primary, the Granite State insists there will be no repeat of Iowa.
Look, all I can say about Iowa is it was an embarrassment. It was a disgrace.
I'm frustrated. I'm mad as hell. Everybody is.
Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez said the process will be reviewed.
Is Iowa about to lose their first-in-the-nation caucus status?
Well, that's the conversation that will absolutely happen after this election cycle.
At least one presidential candidate, Tulsi Gabbard, has called on Chairman Perez to resign. He said he has absolutely no intention of stepping down. Elaine?
All right, Nicole, thank you. President Trump returns to the campaign trail tomorrow in New Hampshire. It's his first rally since his impeachment acquittal. Natalie Brand is at the White House. Natalie, good evening.
Good evening, Elaine. And this is a strategy we also saw ahead of the Iowa caucuses. The Trump campaign is trying to steal the spotlight from Democratic hopefuls and bolster its base using impeachment as a rallying cry.
A rapid-fire series of Sunday tweets makes clear the president is preoccupied with politics post-impeachment and acquittal, targeting those who voted to convict him and calling Democrats crazed and badly wounded.
This president is only getting more emboldened.
While the president's impeachment inquiry may be over, both Democratic and Republican lawmakers have promised investigations will continue.
The whistleblower episode needs to be investigated by Richard Burr, but if Rudy Giuliani has any information coming out of the Ukraine, he needs to turn it over to the Department of Justice because it could be Russian propaganda.
Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham, speaking to Face the Nation, issued a firm warning not only to the president's personal attorney, but all U.S. politicians.
After talking to the Attorney General and the Intelligence Chairman, that any documents coming out of the Ukraine against any American, Republican or Democrat, need to be looked at by the intelligence services, who has expertise. I don't, because Russia is playing us all like a fiddle.
Senator Graham defended the administration's removal of impeachment witnesses EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland and Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman from the National Security Council.
I think his reassignment was justified. I don't think he could be effective at the NSC.
But some GOP senators discouraged the president from taking action against those who testified.
I obviously am not in favor of any kind of retribution against anyone who came forward with evidence.
A senior administration official confirms to CBS News that some Republican senators called the White House and said it would be wiser if Ambassador Sondland was allowed to resign quietly in a few weeks. Elaine?
Natalie, thanks. The Defense Department today identified 2 American soldiers killed in Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class Javier Gutierrez of San Antonio, Texas, and Sergeant First Class Antonio Rodriguez of Las Cruces, New Mexico, were killed in Nangarhar Province on Saturday. The 2 were shot when an Afghan dressed in an army uniform opened fire with a machine gun. Thailand is a country in mourning following its worst mass shooting. Chaos erupted when a gunman opened fire on strangers in a shopping mall. At least 29 people were killed. Nearly 60 others were wounded. The gunman, described as a disgruntled soldier, was killed by police. People around the world are celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year today. Many turned out in San Francisco for the festivities despite fears about the spreading coronavirus. Tonight, a team of World Health Organization experts is headed to Beijing to investigate the deadly outbreak. In China, nearly 40,000 people have been infected. More than 900 have died. Outside China, there have been more than 300 confirmed cases. Here's Deborah Pata.
Japan is scrambling to prevent the 70 cases of coronavirus on the Princess Diamond cruise ship moored off Yokohama from becoming a far bigger outbreak. There's a lot at stake. The country is preparing to welcome visitors to the Olympic Games in Tokyo this summer and needs to show it can contain the infection. At least 13 Americans are among the confirmed cases on board. All passengers are confined to their rooms.
We're certainly prepared to do the 14 days, but I don't think it's even safe to be here.
Hong Kong is also taking no chances at its borders. Now travelers not only from Wuhan, but anywhere in mainland China will have to submit to a 14-day quarantine monitored by GPS-enabled wristbands.
In Hubei province, China, the crisis epicenter, over 50 million people remain under siege. China is being criticized for failing to respond to early warnings about the coronavirus. Dr. Li Wenliang, who died, was silenced when he sounded the alarm about a virulent new virus infecting people late last year. Chinese Ambassador Sui on Face the Nation.
I don't know who tried to silence him, but there was certainly disagreement, or people were not able to reach agreement on what exactly the virus is.
And now what is clear is that it's not only the virus, but the fear of it that's spreading so rapidly. Deborah Patter, CBS News, Hong Kong.
Across the United States, officials urged people to turn out for Lunar New Year celebrations. But as Mola Lengi reports, the outbreak is taking a costly toll.
Hundreds of Americans remain under a 2-week quarantine on military bases in Omaha, San Antonio, and Fairfield, California. More than 500 U.S. citizens have been transported from Wuhan, China, back to the U.S., where they were greeted by virus response teams in hazmat suits. Dr. Henry Walk of the CDC leads the team at Travis Air Force Base in California.
Certainly, it's concerning.
Dr. Walk says only a handful of the evacuees displayed symptoms and are being monitored to make sure they don't have the virus, which, so far, appears to be having more of an impact on the health of U.S. businesses.
It's Asian American communities like LA's Chinatown here that are really feeling the fallout from the outbreak. Business owners we spoke with say they are combating the fear of the virus as much as they are the virus itself.
With United, Delta, and American Airlines suspending all travel to and from China, tourism officials in L.A. estimate a $920 million loss in Chinese tourism to the city this year. All this happening during the Chinese Lunar New Year, what is typically peak season for so many Chinese-style businesses in the U.S. In recent weeks, other cities, including Alhambra, California, have canceled their Lunar New Year celebrations amid concerns of low turnout due to fears of the coronavirus. The show went on in San Francisco's Chinatown after health officials in the city decided the risk of contracting the virus was low.
We are safe and we're healthy here. So don't worry about whatever the room is saying.
We know in China.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and Senator Chuck Schumer kicked off Lunar New Year celebrations in New York's Chinatown, with most saying they saw little impact from the virus.
Some people warned us not to come down, but it seems fine.
Mola Lenghi, CBS News, Los Angeles.
2 New York City police officers were shot and wounded in separate ambushes that authorities are calling assassination attempts. This morning, a gunman walked into a Bronx police station and opened fire, hitting one officer. Police charge he's the same man who wounded another officer sitting in an NYPD van Saturday night. Both officers are expected to make full recoveries. It's Hollywood's big night, the 92nd Annual Academy Awards. Chris Martinez in Los Angeles has some of this year's top storylines.
Hollywood is ready for its biggest show of the year as the film industry honors its very best. This year, the comic book-inspired Joker leads the pack with 11 nominations, followed by The Irishman, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, each with 10 nods. They're among the 9 films, all vying for Best Picture.
For me, this was a really good year in film. I think there were a lot of possibilities.
Variety magazine's Tim Gray says this year, no one film is expected to sweep the awards, which could mean a night of surprises. And for the second year in a row, the ceremony itself will be streamlined, with a long list of celebrity presenters replacing the traditional show host.
Everybody was a little nervous about is this going to change the DNA of the Oscar show, and it didn't.
But beyond the winners, this year there's a dark cloud hanging over Hollywood's brightest night, with many expressing outrage over a lack of diversity among the nominees.
I'm free, my family should be too.
Harriet's Cynthia Erivo is the only person of color nominated among all the acting categories, and no women were nominated for Best Director, including Greta Gerwig, whose film Little Women was nominated for Best Screenplay and Best Picture.
I think that is the narrative of this year's awards, is that exclusion and lack of diversity. And I think that will be part of the conversation right up until the last envelope is opened.
As for who will ultimately take home Hollywood gold, only Oscar knows. Chris Martinez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Actor Robert Conrad has died. He's best known for his role as James West in the 1960s CBS hit The Wild Wild West.
You are formidable. I drink a lot of milk.
Conrad starred and did his own stunts. He called it James Bond as a cowboy. In the 70s, Conrad starred in Baa Black Sheep. The show was based on the life of World War II hero Pappy Boyington. Robert Conrad was 84 years old. Straight ahead on tonight's CBS Weekend News, why failing to pay medical bills could land you behind bars. What propelled a 747 to the fastest ever New York to London flight? There is at least one issue a divided electorate can agree on this election year. A recent poll finds 90% of those surveyed agreed on the importance of making health care more affordable. Millions of Americans remain uninsured, and as Meg Oliver reports in partnership with ProPublica, some people are even going to jail because they're squeezed by a system that's putting new demands on overburdened incomes.
Amen. Tress and Heather Biggs' son, Lane, was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 5 years old. At the same time, Heather suffered seizures from Lyme disease.
We had so many multiple health issues in our family at the same time. It put us in a bracket that made insurance unattainable. It would have made no sense. We would have had to have not eaten and not had a home.
Biggs was working 2 jobs, but they fell behind on their bills. Then the unthinkable happened.
You wouldn't think you'd go to jail over a medical bill.
Tress Biggs went to jail for failing to appear in court over unpaid medical bills. What was that like?
Scary. Like scared to death. Because, you know, I'm a country kid. I had to strip down and get hosed and put a jumpsuit on.
Bail was $500.
Mm-hmm.
How much money did you have at that time?
Like maybe 50 to 100.
In rural Coffeyville, Kansas, where the poverty rate is twice the national average, attorneys like Michael Hassenplug have built successful businesses representing medical providers to collect debt owed by their neighbors.
I'm just doing my job. They want the money collected, and I'm trying to do my job as best I can
by following the law.
That law was put in place at Hassenplug's own recommendation to the local judge. The attorney uses that law by asking the court to direct people with unpaid medical bills to appear in court every 3 months and state they are too poor to pay in what is called a debtor's exam. If 2 hearings are missed, the judge issues an arrest warrant for contempt of court. Bail is set at $500.
And how do you get paid?
I get paid on what's collected.
From the bail money?
Well, if the bail money is applied to the judgment, yes, I get a portion of that.
Are you sending them to jail for collection then and not contempt?
No, we're sending them to jail for contempt of court for failure to appear.
In most courts, bail money is returned when defendants appear in court. But in almost every case in Coffeyville, that money goes to pay attorneys like Hassenplug and the medical debt his clients are owed.
This raises serious constitutional concerns.
Nusrat Chaudhry is a deputy director at the ACLU.
What's happening here is a jailhouse shakedown for cash. That is the criminalization of private debt.
In a recent report, the ACLU found tens of thousands of these warrants are issued annually, sometimes to collect as little as $28.
I mean, it wasn't like we were just not paying any of our medical bills. That was the problem. We couldn't afford to pay all of them.
Is jail the answer?
No.
We went to court on debt collection day. They wouldn't allow our cameras in, but we watched more than 60 people swear they didn't have enough money to pay. Only one of them had an attorney representing them. Elaine?
Such an important story, Meg Oliver. Thank you. Coming up, the floodwaters are gone, and it's time for Carnival in Venice. Today in Venice, Italy, boats and gondolas paraded down the Grand Canal in style, ferrying people dressed in elaborate costumes and masks, celebrating the city's annual carnival. The party, dating to the 11th century, goes on until Ash Wednesday and the 40 days of Lent. A new speed record in the air. A British Airways 747 recorded the fastest ever subsonic flight from New York to London last night. The plane flew at more than 800 miles per hour, pushed along by a jet stream, powered up by a big storm. Total flying time, 4 hours and 56 minutes. Headwinds made the return flight back nearly 3 hours longer. A zoo in Mexico is celebrating new arrivals, 3 of them. The lion cubs, 2 males and 1 female, made their on-camera debut this weekend. They were born in January at the Parque Loro Zoo in Puebla. The cubs will eventually find homes in other zoos to help conserve their species. That's the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. I'm Elaine Quijano in New York. 60 Minutes is next. Good night.